It's more than a change in practices. It's almost a change in philosophy. Everybody that's really having success with it, they're not just adding practices, they're changing the way they do the business that they do.
When thinking about the land that you guys are renting, can you tell us a little bit about your landlords and maybe some of the conservation practices that you're doing on that land, and how and if you started a conversation about conservation on that rented land with your landlord?
Most of our land is family owned, so not necessarily my husband and I, but his parents. And they're open to these types of practices. I'm talking specifically cover crops, but maybe wouldn't have tried it on their own. So for us, it's been having a conversation with them about things that we want to try and why and how it's going to work and all of those kind of things.
You know, this is the first year they've ever had cover crops on the farm, and we were probably the catalyst for having cover crops on the farm, because I suggested that maybe we would like to try it, and they said, we've always wondered about trying it, but we've never wanted to try it. Like, we've never been willing to take the risk. So at some point there, I think we're the ones that are willing to take the risk and try it.
13 years ago, as I was out with a chisel plow and then that spring with a field cultivator, I'm like, I am absolutely sick of this. I just cannot stand seeing these little valleys washed out and whatnot. There's got to be a better way. So we started to strip till, and nutrient management and getting rid of erosion was my big thing.
I would say overall, it's all a conversation. It's talking about what's important to them, what's important to us, what experience we've had, what experience our neighbors have had.
So as I talk to a landlord, I say, well, that farm's your retirement, and I want to take care of it. I want to be the one that you can say, he did a really nice job of keeping this thing up. And I'm not going to get that kind of conversation without doing something different.
We also have a couple farms that have farm managers. So in that case, it's been really important to have lots of conversations about what's important to the farm manager, what's important to the absentee landowner. One of them happens to live on one of the coasts and has lots of ideas about how things should be farmed and what's important to her and her values and things like that. So for us, it's been kind of understanding where she's coming from, and she's very open and receptive to these types of things. Oftentimes, it's sort of steering her into what we think might work.
Like, in my mind, that's one of the big things that we want to use as a differentiator. We're not going to farm as a primary source of income if we just use the family ground. We're going to have to go access ground that we don't currently have. And I think some of these things that I'm passionate about could be used to help, grow the operation and maybe talk to other potential landowners that we would rent from.
If you have to take him by the hand and take him to your farm and get a shovel out and show him this is what it looks like, on my farm, and then have him go back and do that to his farm if those practices haven't been in place, and I'll just about bet you he'll call you back and say, we need to talk more.
One thing that I also hear a lot as I go out and talk to farmer groups in particular is they know there's lots of resources available, but they don't always know where to start or who to start with. I think it's we're very fortunate in the state that there are a lot of resources, both from a technical standpoint and a funding standpoint. But I think sometimes that can be a little intimidating because you don't know, do I go to NRCS? Do I go to the state? Do I go to Nature Conservancy? Do I go to Iowa Corn? I don't know where to start. So again, find out from a neighbor who he or she has worked with, what kind of experience they've had, and hopefully they can connect you to somebody where they've had a good experience.
There's a lot of really great resources on Iowa Corn website about rented land and about empowering landlords to have that conversation, because obviously the farmer, this is their day in and day out. They know the farm better than anybody, and the landlord might not feel equipped to have that conversation or have the expertise. And so to just open it up and have that open conversation is a great start.
It's kind of crazy when you're going through alfalfa about this tall and you're thinking, man, I should have baled this first. But you're going through that with a strip till and then coming back with a planter. I mean, it's like planting into a golf course. It's really cool. We've got some farms that are fantastic to do fall in, and we've got some that are not, and so spring works better. Some of the stuff that we have cover crops on is where we do a lot of our spring. The first year was extremely obvious in how much labor I saved. It took a little bit of time to dial in the nutrient part of it, and that part of it over time, we're now saving 30 to 40% on input costs compared to what we were 5, 6, 7 years ago.
We're in a heavy seed corn area, so cover crops work especially well in crops that are harvested early. We can get a really good stand with cover crops, and so have had some really, really good success with that, and then can expand it into the rest of our acres.
The strip till, all I can say is how the soil tilt has changed in this amount of time is incredible. Our earthworm populations are huge, and our water infiltration is fantastic. We had lots and lots and lots of little waterways on our farms, and we have been able to get rid of most of those and actually farm more acres by using strip till and not have erosion problems. We still have, on 1,200 acres, we have 3 waterways, and they're not very big. There's a total of maybe 5 acres that are grass waterways.
Maybe one of the best things to do is find a neighbor or someone who has had good experience and learn from that a little bit and maybe bring them into the conversation.
On our farm, going from conventional type tillage or conservation tillage to a strip till, no till, it was, the first year it was extremely obvious in how much labor I saved. It took a little bit of time to dial in the nutrient part of it, and that part of it over time, we're now saving 30 to 40% on input costs compared to what we were 5, 6, 7 years ago, which is huge. And so when you look at the amount of labor, the amount of iron that it takes, the horsepower it takes, and you start eliminating those things, you can be so much more efficient, so much better at what you do, have more time not only to look at your crops, manage your crops, but also time to be with your kids and your wife.
We are always, will make ourselves available and want to be available, but oftentimes it's those local resources that really can help get the ball rolling and then figure out where it goes from there.
We had the NRCS come out. They called and said, we want to come out, we want to do some soil evaluation at your place. So they start digging and doing their stuff, and they're just like, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then they're like, is this yours over here on the other side of the fence? I said, no, that's not mine. I says, but that guy over there, he does, everything that he does is with a chisel plow, a field cultivator, whatever the case. I mean, it's black when he plants that farm. You know, and they take the compaction probe, and they start sticking that in there. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, well, you guys must not be on a wheel track at my place. Let's go find a wheel track. Went over and found a wheel track, and it just, bam, goes down through. And it was just absolutely amazing. And then when they do the, I don't know what test they call it, but they take a steel cylinder and they stick it down in the ground, they fill it up with water and see how long it takes for that water to go down through. It was amazing how fast it went in our ground, and it sat on his. So if you can do things like that, starting a new conversation with a new landlord, you will absolutely convince them that you're the one that needs to be on that farm.
A lot of the cost share programs at the state level are through the State Water Quality Initiative. So that's funding, cost share funding for things like cover crops. So $25 an acre for first-time users, $15 an acre for those who are returning. Strip till and no-till, there's cost share for that. And then a nitrification inhibitor, cost share available for that. So for those types of management practices, a tenant can apply for that, a landowner can apply for that. One of the farmers made a comment earlier that he doesn't see as much enthusiasm around some of these things as he would like. And one point I think I want to emphasize is sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for all the great things that are happening across the state, and all the farmers and landowners, whether they're tenants or they own the land, all the good things that are happening. So I just want to kind of put that out there, that never before have we seen this type of commitment Never before have we had this type of funding available to help support some of these practices. At a minimum, next fiscal year, we'll have an extra $15 million to put toward these types of practices. So more cost share funding available, more demonstration projects where we can start to demonstrate the value of these practices in terms of water quality and soil health benefits and things like that.
There's just a ton of stuff that out there that's coming down the pipeline with end users, municipalities, private industrial facilities that want to work with farmers on water quality, on land conservation. And so some of the new stuff that we're going to do is I guess I shouldn't say it's new. We may try some new types of seed on our cover crops that would be beneficial to cattle.
From our perspective, everything's new. So my new things will be things that Lance started a few years ago, it sounds like. But we did, like I said, we have cover crops on the farm in Ogden for the first time. But we're going to try to plant it green for the soybeans this year and just see what happens. One unique thing that my wife and I have is because we have off-farm jobs, our risk tolerance is probably higher than if we would have quit the jobs to move home to farm.
We have done a lot of analysis on areas of fields that are not productive and have chosen to take those areas of the field out of production based on what the data is telling us.
There's lots and lots and lots of opportunities to do different things. We're going to try some new stuff with sequestering nitrogen and holding that more in the soil. And that's all attractive to these private entities, but it's also attractive to the landlord because now they can say that they're part of this too. They can tell that story. And again, going back to we're taking care of their retirement and making it better and better.
Lots on nutrient management and grid sampling and things like that. And one thing that we're have just been talking about for the last couple months is putting in a wetland, a water quality wetland on one of our areas of our farm. Very early stages for something like that, but I think it just goes to show that there are opportunities everywhere. We probably just have to look, find the right people, and ask the right questions.
We use a nitrogen modeling tool, and there's a ton of those out there. They're kind of hard to get access to because most of them are sold through retailers, but we use that for 3 years now on Dad's farm. And I am shocked how different the right plan was for each year. The amount of nitrogen we applied has been very different in each of the 3 years, and the yields have been the best we've had typically on that farm. And we've seen that as we've brought our nitrogen tool across other places. So I don't know what the right answer is, but there's a lot more to this nitrogen piece on an annual basis than I think anybody knows, because we've always had just the past to look at and use that as our model. But when we have a way to look into the future, you just have a whole different set of information to pull off of that maybe makes you be more proactive instead of reactive.
We're using analytics to look at the productivity and profitability of farms and segments of farms to decide if it makes sense to farm the full farm or if some of that should be taken out and turned to pasture or something else like that. So lots of things like that happening across the state that we'll look to learn from those experiences.
Once you start seeing the benefits of it, hands down, you can make changes that will be life impacting. If I do the same old thing, it's the same old thing. So people start to notice, what's he doing over there? And they'll laugh, and then they're like, wow, that really did work. Maybe we should be thinking about that.